The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the pristine marble floors of the 30th floor of Pinnacle Corporate Tower. At exactly 5:47 a.m., Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart through the doorway, the wheels squeaking slightly against the polished surface. Her weathered hands gripped the handle steady, calloused from years of scrubbing and mopping. At 52, she moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had perfected their routine through countless repetitions. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Excuse me, what are you doing up here? The sharp voice cut through the early morning silence like a blade. Bradley Morrison, Vice President of Operations at Henderson & Associates Financial Group, stood in the hallway adjusting his Italian silk tie. His 6-foot frame towered over Maria's modest 5'3" stature, designer suit immaculate, even at this early hour. The executive floors are off-limits during business preparations. Maria paused, her dark eyes meeting his briefly before she reached into her uniform pocket. I have authorization to clean all floors, sir. Building management assigned me this route 15 years ago. Her voice carried a slight accent, remnants of her childhood in East Los Angeles, but her English was clear and precise. Bradley snatched the laminated badge from her outstretched hand, examining it with theatrical skepticism. 15 years of what exactly? Making messes worse? He gestured dramatically at the spotless hallway behind him. Do you have any idea what kind of important meetings happen up here? What kind of clients we entertain? Several junior executives had emerged from their offices, drawn by the commotion. They formed a loose semicircle around the interaction, coffee cups in hand, watching the entertainment unfold. Someone discreetly activated their phone camera, sensing potential social media content. I understand, sir. I'll work quickly and stay out of your way. Maria moved to retrieve her badge, but Bradley held it just out of reach, his expression shifting into something more predatory. You know what I think? I think someone like you belongs on the lower floors. Maybe the parking garage level, where the work matches the worker. His comment drew snickers from the gathering crowd. 15 years. And what do you have to show for it? Still pushing the same cart, still scrubbing toilets. Maria stood perfectly still, her shoulders squared but her expression neutral. For just a moment, something flickered behind her eyes, a hardness that seemed at odds with her humble uniform and quiet demeanor. The sleeve of her blue cleaning jacket shifted slightly, revealing the edge of what appeared to be a tattoo, though the design remained hidden. I take pride in my work, sir. Every job deserves to be done with excellence. Her voice remained steady, professional, but there was an underlying steel that made Bradley's smirk falter momentarily. He recovered quickly, tossing her badge onto the floor near her feet. Pride doesn't pay for penthouse apartments, does it? Some people are meant for service, others for leadership. Natural order of things. The circle of observers had grown larger, phones now openly recording the interaction. Maria bent to retrieve her badge, her movements deliberate and controlled. As she straightened, she tucked a strand of graying hair behind her ear, a gesture that revealed more of the mysterious marking on her forearm. 15 years, Bradley repeated, savoring the words. 15 years of invisible work by an invisible person. That's all some people ever amount to. Maria Santos had learned long ago that invisibility was both a burden and a gift. In the pre-dawn darkness of Phoenix, Arizona, she drove her 20-year-old Honda Civic through empty streets toward Pinnacle Corporate Tower, the city's second tallest building. The radio played softly, a Spanish-language news program that kept her connected to the community she'd grown up in, even as her work took her into a different world entirely. Her small apartment in Mesa told the story of a life lived simply, but with purpose. The living room was sparse but clean, decorated with photographs of family members and a few mementos that seemed carefully chosen. On the kitchen counter, a prayer candle flickered next to a small American flag. The bedroom was equally modest, dominated by a single bed, with a handmade quilt, and a nightstand that held only a lamp, a worn Bible, and a small wooden box that she never opened in front of visitors. What her neighbors didn't know, what her coworkers at the building couldn't guess, was that the wooden box contained items that told a completely different story about Maria Santos. Inside, wrapped in faded tissue paper, lay a collection of military commendations, service ribbons, and a single medal that represented the highest honor the United States could bestow upon a member of its armed forces. The Congressional Medal of Honor, awarded for actions so extraordinary and selfless that they transcended ordinary concepts of duty and courage. Maria had been Petty Officer First Class Maria Elena Santos, United States Navy, specializing in intelligence operations and combat diving. For 8 years, she had served her country in ways that most Americans would never know about, in places that didn't appear on standard maps, conducting missions that remained classified decades after their completion. Her service had taken her to hostile waters in the Persian Gulf, where she had led underwater reconnaissance missions that provided critical intelligence for larger operations. She had trained with Navy SEALs, mastering skills in close-quarters combat, explosives, navigation, and survival that few people, regardless of gender, ever acquired. The medal in her wooden box had been earned during a mission off the coast of Somalia in 2009. Intelligence had indicated that American hostages were being held on a cargo ship that had been seized by pirates. The initial rescue attempt had gone catastrophically wrong when the primary assault team's boat was destroyed by an improvised explosive device. Maria, part of the backup reconnaissance team, had made a decision that changed everything. Against direct orders to maintain her position, she had dove from her concealed location and swum nearly 2 miles through shark-infested waters to reach the cargo ship. Using climbing equipment and techniques she had perfected during training, she had scaled the ship's hull in complete darkness, neutralized 3 armed guards silently, and then spent 6 hours systematically locating and freeing the hostages while coordinating with naval forces for extraction. Her actions had saved 17 American lives and provided intelligence that led to the dismantling of one of the most dangerous piracy networks in the region. The mission had remained classified for national security reasons, which meant that Maria's heroism had been recognized at the highest levels of government, but never publicly acknowledged. She had received the Medal of Honor in a private ceremony attended by only a handful of officials, sworn to secrecy about the details that had earned her the nation's highest military decoration. But Maria's story had taken an unexpected turn shortly after that recognition. During a routine training exercise, she had suffered a severe back injury that ended her diving career and eventually led to her medical discharge from the Navy. The transition to civilian life had been more difficult than any mission she had ever completed. The skills that had made her invaluable in military service, precision under pressure, the ability to remain calm in life-threatening situations, tactical thinking, and absolute reliability, didn't translate easily to civilian employment opportunities. She had tried various jobs after her discharge. Security work felt too much like her military service without the sense of greater purpose. Office jobs frustrated her with their inefficiency and politics. It was only when she took a temporary position with a commercial cleaning company that she discovered something unexpected. Cleaning work provided the same satisfaction she had once found in military service. It required attention to detail, systematic approach, pride in execution, and the ability to work independently while maintaining high standards. When the position at Pinnacle Corporate Tower became available, Maria had seen it as an opportunity to establish stability and routine. The work began at 5 a.m, which meant she could complete her duties before most of the building's occupants arrived. She could work methodically through her assigned floors, taking pride in maintaining spaces that others relied upon, even if they never noticed her efforts. For 15 years, she had cleaned the same bathrooms, mopped the same hallways, and emptied the same trash cans. She had watched employees come and go, witnessed celebrations and terminations, observed the daily dramas of corporate life, while remaining essentially invisible to those around her. She knew which executives arrived early and which ones stayed late, who treated support staff with respect, and who barely acknowledged their existence. The work was honest, and it was hers. She had chosen it, performed it with the same dedication she had once brought to classified military operations, and found a different kind of purpose in maintaining spaces where others could work effectively. The fact that people like Bradley Morrison saw her as somehow less than worthy because of her occupation was their limitation, not hers. Maria understood that her current life appeared unremarkable to outside observers. She drove an old car, lived in a modest apartment, and worked a job that many people considered menial. What they couldn't see was that every aspect of her daily routine was chosen deliberately. She had earned the right to live quietly, to serve in a different way, to find dignity in work that others dismissed. The wooden box in her bedroom remained closed most days, its contents a reminder of a different chapter in her life rather than a source of daily identity. She had been a warrior once, had faced death and saved lives, had been honored by her country for extraordinary courage. Now she was something else. A woman who took pride in humble work, who had chosen peace over conflict, who had earned the right to live without having to prove herself to anyone. But some mornings, as she prepared for another day of cleaning toilets and mopping floors, Maria would touch the wooden box gently and remember what it felt like to be seen as extraordinary. She would recall the weight of responsibility, the trust placed in her by her country.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
The moments when her skills and courage had made the difference between life and death for people she would never meet again. Those memories weren't sources of regret or longing. They were reminders that strength came in many forms, that service could be quiet as well as dramatic, and that the most important battles were often fought by people who never sought recognition for their efforts. Maria Santos had learned to find honor in invisibility, purpose in routine, and dignity in work that others considered beneath notice. She had no way of knowing that her carefully constructed, quiet life was about to collide with her extraordinary past in ways that would change everything. Not just for her, but for everyone who had underestimated the woman who cleaned their bathrooms with the same precision she had once brought to saving lives in hostile waters halfway around the world. The wooden box in her bedroom held more than medals and commendations. It contained the story of a woman who had served her country with distinction, who had transitioned to civilian life with grace, and who had chosen to find purpose in work that others dismissed. Soon, that box would be opened, and the woman who had remained invisible for 15 years would be seen clearly for the first time by people who had never bothered to look beyond her uniform and cleaning cart. Maria Santos was about to discover that some stories, no matter how carefully hidden, eventually demand to be told. The incident with Bradley Morrison on the 30th floor marked the beginning of what would become a systematic campaign to make Maria Santos feel unwelcome in the building she had faithfully served for 15 years. What started as casual dismissal evolved into something more deliberate, more personal, and more cruel than Maria had experienced in all her years of quiet service. Bradley's influence within Henderson and Associates Financial Group extended far beyond his official title. As the nephew of senior partner Margaret Henderson and a graduate of prestigious Wharton Business School, he wielded social power that reached into every corner of the corporate culture. His opinion carried weight not just because of his position, but because other employees understood that aligning with Bradley's perspectives could advance their careers, while opposing him could prove professionally costly. The morning after their confrontation, Maria arrived at her usual time to find that someone had deliberately made messes in the executive bathrooms. Coffee grounds were scattered across countertops, paper towels had been thrown on floors, and soap dispensers had been emptied onto mirrors. The work that normally took her 45 minutes to complete required nearly 2 hours, throwing off her entire schedule and forcing her to work through her brief break period. When she mentioned the unusual conditions to Bob Williams, the building's facilities manager, his response was dismissive. "Maybe you're just not as thorough as you used to be," he suggested, not looking up from his clipboard. 15 years is a long time to do the same job. People get comfortable. Standards slip. Bob had always been cordial with Maria in the past, even complimentary about her work ethic and reliability. His sudden coolness indicated that word of Bradley's disapproval had reached him, and he was adjusting his attitude accordingly. In the complex ecosystem of corporate politics, a facilities manager couldn't afford to appear sympathetic to someone who had fallen out of favor with the vice president. The pattern escalated over the following days. Elevator buttons would be pressed for every floor when Maria needed to transport her cart between levels, forcing her to stop repeatedly and extending her travel time significantly. Her cleaning supply requests began to be delayed or partially filled, leaving her without essential materials needed to complete her work properly. The small staff break room on the service level, where she had eaten lunch quietly for years, became a place where conversations would stop abruptly when she entered, replaced by uncomfortable silence or whispered comments just loud enough for her to overhear. Jessica Chen, the human resources manager, called Maria into her office during the second week of the harassment campaign. Jessica's corner office on the 28th floor was decorated with motivational posters about teamwork and diversity, creating an ironic backdrop for what was essentially a disciplinary meeting disguised as a coaching session. "Maria, we've received some feedback about your work performance," Jessica began, her tone professionally neutral but her eyes cold. "Several employees have expressed concerns about cleanliness standards on the upper floors." Maria sat quietly in the uncomfortable chair across from Jessica's polished desk, her hands folded in her lap. She had learned long ago that in situations like this, it was better to listen completely before responding. Her military training had taught her that information gathering was always the first priority in any tactical situation. "Specifically," Jessica continued, consulting a folder that appeared to contain several written complaints, "there have been reports of inadequate restroom maintenance, supplies not being restocked promptly, and general concerns about whether our current cleaning arrangements meet the standards expected in a professional environment." The complaints were clearly coordinated, probably originating from Bradley and his circle of associates. Maria had seen similar campaigns during her military service, where unpopular officers would find themselves facing a sudden influx of minor infractions and procedural violations. The goal was never to address legitimate issues, but to create a paper trail that could justify predetermined decisions. "I'd like to review the specific complaints," Maria said calmly. "I take pride in my work and want to address any legitimate concerns." Jessica's expression hardened slightly. "That's not really how this process works, Maria. We're not here to debate the validity of feedback from our valued employees. We're here to discuss how you can improve your performance to meet their expectations." The meeting continued for 30 minutes, with Jessica outlining a new performance improvement plan that included additional reporting requirements, shortened deadlines, and expanded responsibilities without additional compensation. Maria would now be required to document her work more extensively, submit weekly reports on supply usage, and make herself available for spot inspections at any time during her shift. "I want you to understand," Jessica concluded, "that Henderson and Associates has very high standards. We've been patient with your limitations, but there are plenty of cleaning services in Phoenix that would be eager to work with a prestigious firm like ours." The threat was clear, delivered with the kind of bureaucratic politeness that made it legally defensible while ensuring the message was unmistakable. Maria signed the performance improvement plan without comment, understanding that resistance at this point would only provide additional ammunition for her opponents. Word of Maria's meeting with Human Resources spread quickly through the building's social networks. Employees who had previously treated her with basic courtesy now avoided eye contact when she cleaned their work areas. Some actively ignored her presence, continuing phone conversations or meetings as if she were invisible, while others made pointedly loud comments about cleanliness standards whenever she was within earshot. The psychological pressure was expertly applied. During her lunch break, Maria would sit alone in the service-level break room, listening to maintenance workers and security guards discuss the rumors circulating about her job performance. 15 years and she's just figuring out how to clean a toilet, one janitor commented loudly. "Makes you wonder what she's been doing all this time." Tommy Rodriguez, the morning security guard who had always greeted Maria pleasantly during her years at the building, began treating her with professional distance. When she needed access to locked areas for cleaning, he would make her wait while he finished other tasks, or would escort her with obvious reluctance. "Just following new protocols," he would mutter when she thanked him, avoiding her eyes. The isolation extended beyond the building itself. At the small market where Maria bought her lunch, the cashier who had chatted with her for years suddenly became businesslike and curt. At the coffee shop across the street where she occasionally treated herself to a morning beverage, the barista who had learned her order began acting as if he had never seen her before. Bradley's influence reached into the neighborhood business community, where relationships with Henderson and Associates employees were valuable. Social media became another battlefield. Someone had recorded the initial confrontation between Maria and Bradley, editing the video to make her appear stubborn and disrespectful, while portraying him as a patient professional dealing with a difficult service worker. The video appeared on local community forums with captions like, "When customer service goes wrong," and "This is why some people stay in minimum wage jobs." The comments section became a repository for cruel speculation about Maria's background, intelligence, and worth as a person. Anonymous users shared theories about her immigration status, her education level, and her family situation, each comment building on the others to create a narrative of someone who didn't belong in decent society, much less in a prestigious corporate environment. Maria found herself checking the forums despite knowing it would only cause pain. She read comments suggesting that people like her were taking jobs from real Americans, that she probably didn't understand English well enough to follow proper cleaning procedures, and that her attitude showed why certain types of people would never advance beyond service positions. The anonymity of the internet allowed people to express prejudices they might never voice directly, creating a chorus of cruelty that followed her home each night. Her small apartment in Mesa, once a sanctuary from the pressures of work, began to feel like a place of exile. The neighbors who had previously been friendly became distant, influenced by gossip that had spread through community networks. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman next door who had often chatted with Maria about gardening, stopped acknowledging her presence. The maintenance staff at the apartment complex began treating routine requests with suspicion, as if Maria's problems at work indicated broader character flaws. The financial pressure was subtle but real. Her performance improvement plan included requirements for additional supplies and equipment that came out of her modest salary. The new reporting procedures required her to stay late completing paperwork, cutting into the hours she had previously used for a second part-time cleaning job that supplemented her income. Small expenses that had never been problematic became sources of stress as her financial margins tightened. Maria's health began to show the effects of sustained stress. She had always prided herself on physical fitness, maintaining the conditioning habits she had developed during military service, but the constant tension began to take its toll. She found herself losing sleep, lying awake at night replaying confrontations and preparing for the next day's challenges. Her appetite diminished, and the careful nutrition routine she had maintained for years became inconsistent. The wooden box in her bedroom remained unopened, but Maria found herself looking at it more frequently. The contrast between the woman she had been and the woman she was now treated as became more stark with each passing day. She would remember moments when her opinions had been sought by commanding officers, when her expertise had been valued by teammates, when her courage had been recognized at the highest levels of government. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else, someone who had existed in a different world with different rules. The woman who had once infiltrated enemy positions and saved American lives was now being systematically humiliated by people who saw her as nothing more than a menial laborer whose continued employment was a matter of charity rather than merit. The campaign against Maria reached a new level of sophistication when Bradley began organizing what he called efficiency consultations. These were informal meetings where employees on the executive floors would discuss ways to improve building operations, including the cleaning services. The meetings were scheduled during Maria's work hours, ensuring that she would be cleaning nearby bathrooms while employees discussed her inadequacies in detail. "The question isn't whether we need cleaning services," Bradley would say, his voice carrying clearly through thin office walls, "but whether we're getting professional-level service or just going through the motions with someone who's been coasting for years." The discussions would include suggestions for replacing the current cleaning arrangement with a more modern service company, speculation about whether Maria understood the importance of her work, and comments about how the building's prestigious reputation required employees at every level who could represent the company's values appropriately. These meetings served multiple purposes. They created additional documentation of employee dissatisfaction that could be used to justify termination. They maintained pressure on Maria by ensuring she overheard criticism regularly, and they reinforced Bradley's position as a leader who cared about organizational excellence. The fact that the criticism was largely manufactured didn't matter. What mattered was creating a narrative that would support the predetermined conclusion that Maria Santos didn't belong at Pinnacle Corporate Tower. The isolation became complete when even the building's other service workers began to distance themselves from Maria. Influenced by rumors about her poor performance and potential termination, they worried that association with her might jeopardize their own positions. The maintenance staff stopped including her in their casual conversations. The security guards became strictly professional in their interactions, and the reception desk personnel treated her as if she were a potential security risk rather than a longtime colleague. Maria found herself completely alone in a building where she had worked faithfully for 15 years, surrounded by people who had decided she was worthless based on the word of someone who had never bothered to learn her name before deciding to destroy her reputation. The systematic nature of the campaign was remarkable in its thoroughness and cruel in its effectiveness. Every day brought new challenges designed to make her quit. Her cleaning cart would be moved from where she left it, forcing her to waste time searching. Supplies would be locked away in storage areas she wasn't supposed to access. Work orders would be changed without notice, creating conflicts with her schedule and providing additional evidence of her supposed incompetence. Through it all, Maria maintained her dignity and continued to perform her duties with the same attention to detail she had always brought to her work. She arrived on time, completed her assigned tasks, and treated everyone with professional courtesy despite their treatment of her. But the weight of sustained harassment was becoming increasingly difficult to bear, and she began to understand that her tormentors were patient enough to continue their campaign indefinitely. The woman who had once faced armed enemies in hostile territory was being defeated by a different kind of warfare, one that attacked her spirit rather than her body, one that used social isolation and professional humiliation as weapons more effective than any physical assault. Maria Santos was learning that some battles couldn't be won through courage alone, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemies were the ones who smiled while they destroyed you. 3 weeks into what had become a daily gauntlet of professional humiliation, Maria Santos received a certified letter that would change the trajectory of her carefully ordered life. The envelope arrived on a Saturday morning, delivered to her modest Mesa apartment by a postal worker who required her signature and seemed oddly formal about the process. The return address indicated it came from the Department of Veterans Affairs, but the official seal and expedited delivery suggested something more significant than routine correspondence. Inside, written on heavy government letterhead, was an invitation that Maria read 3 times before its implications fully registered. The Secretary of the Navy, in conjunction with the Department of Defense and the White House Office of Public Engagement, was organizing a special ceremony to honor recipients of the Congressional Medal of Honor, whose service had previously been classified for national security reasons. The event, scheduled for the following month, would take place at the Phoenix Veterans Memorial and would include the first public recognition of missions that had remained secret for over a decade. The letter explained that recent changes in classification status had made it possible to acknowledge publicly the extraordinary service of military personnel whose heroism had been hidden from the American people for operational security reasons. Maria's name appeared on a select list of Medal of Honor recipients whose stories could finally be told, whose sacrifices could finally be recognized, whose courage could finally inspire the communities they had silently protected. The ceremony would include active duty military personnel from all branches, with special participation from Navy SEAL units that had worked alongside the honored recipients during classified operations. Local media would be present, along with families, community leaders, and citizens who wanted to express gratitude to veterans whose service had transcended ordinary concepts of duty and dedication. Maria set the letter on her kitchen table and stared at it for nearly an hour. For 15 years, she had lived with the knowledge that her most significant contributions to her country remained unknown to everyone around her. She had chosen anonymity, had found peace in invisibility, had built a quiet life that honored her service without requiring external validation. The ceremony represented an opportunity to step back into the light, to reclaim recognition that had been deferred for operational necessity. But it also represented a fundamental disruption of the life she had carefully constructed. Once her story became public, once the community learned that the woman who cleaned bathrooms at Pinnacle Corporate Tower was a Medal of Honor recipient, who had saved American lives in classified operations, everything would change. Her co-workers, Her neighbors, her tormentors at Henderson and Associates, would discover that they had been systematically humiliating a national hero. The timing felt like cosmic intervention. At the moment when Bradley Morrison and his allies were closest to achieving their goal of forcing her resignation, when the campaign of harassment had nearly broken her spirit, when she had begun to question her own worth and dignity, the government was offering her a platform to tell her real story. The woman they saw as disposable would be revealed as irreplaceable. The person they dismissed as worthless would be honored as invaluable. Maria walked to her bedroom and opened the wooden box for the first time in months. The Congressional Medal of Honor lay nestled in faded tissue paper, its gold star and ribbons still vibrant despite the years since its presentation. She lifted it carefully, feeling its weight not just physically but emotionally. The medal represented the moment when her courage had been tested absolutely and had not been found wanting, when she had risked everything to save people she would never meet, when she had embodied the highest ideals of military service. Beside the medal lay other mementos of her naval career: commendation ribbons, photographs from training exercises, a challenge coin given to her by the SEAL team leader, whose men she had rescued during that mission off Somalia. Each item told part of a story that had been hidden for so long that sometimes Maria wondered if it had really happened, if the quiet woman who cleaned office buildings had ever been the warrior who had swum through hostile waters to save American lives. The decision to attend the ceremony wasn't immediate. Maria spent the weekend walking through desert parks around Phoenix, thinking about the implications of stepping forward after so many years of stepping back. She considered the impact on her current life, the reaction from people who had treated her with contempt, the responsibility that came with being publicly identified as a hero. She also thought about her father, who had died 5 years earlier without ever being able to tell anyone about his daughter's true service to her country. He had carried the secret proudly but painfully, knowing that Maria's greatest achievement would remain unknown to the community that had watched her grow up. The ceremony would honor his memory as well as her service, allowing the recognition he had always believed she deserved. On Monday morning, Maria returned to Pinnacle Corporate Tower with a different perspective on the harassment she faced. Every snide comment from Bradley Morrison, every dismissive interaction with Jessica Chen, every whispered criticism from coworkers took on a different meaning when viewed against the backdrop of her hidden history. These people were tormenting someone whose courage they couldn't imagine, whose service they couldn't comprehend, whose sacrifice they couldn't appreciate. The abuse continued with predictable consistency. During her lunch break, Maria overheard a conversation between several Henderson and Associates employees, discussing her work performance with theatrical concern. "It's really sad when someone just can't adapt to changing standards," one woman commented loudly. 15 years of the same routine, and she still can't figure out basic cleaning protocols. "Maybe it's time for fresh blood," another voice added. Someone younger, more energetic, more professional in their approach. "This isn't a charity after all." Maria continued eating her sandwich calmly, but inside she was calculating distances and tactical approaches with the automatic precision of her military training. The conversation was taking place 20 feet away, well within the range where her combat skills could neutralize multiple targets before they could react. The thought wasn't malicious, but observational, a professional assessment that occurred without conscious intent. The realization startled her. Despite 15 years of civilian life, despite choosing peace over conflict, despite building an identity around service rather than combat, her warrior instincts remained sharp and ready. The people who saw her as weak and defenseless were sitting within striking distance of someone who had been trained to eliminate threats with lethal efficiency. Their safety depended entirely on her choice to remain hidden, to accept their abuse rather than demonstrate her true capabilities. Bradley Morrison escalated his campaign during the third week, organizing what he called a efficiency review that would evaluate all service providers for their contribution to Henderson and Associates' professional environment. The review would include employee surveys about cleaning quality, management assessments of cost-effectiveness, and recommendations for improving building operations to better reflect the company's prestigious reputation. The announcement was posted in common areas throughout the building, with particular emphasis on the need for honest feedback about services that might not meet contemporary standards. Bradley scheduled open forums where employees could discuss their experiences with building maintenance, creating opportunities for public criticism that would be documented as part of the official review process. We owe it to our clients and our shareholders to ensure that every aspect of our operations reflects excellence, Bradley announced during one forum, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being taken seriously. That includes the people who work in our building, regardless of their position or how long they've been here. The forums became showcases for coordinated complaints about Maria's work, with employees offering increasingly creative criticisms designed to paint her as incompetent and outdated. Someone suggested that her cleaning methods were inefficient compared to modern standards. Another person questioned whether she understood the importance of maintaining confidentiality around sensitive business discussions. A third voice wondered aloud whether the building's insurance coverage adequately protected against liability issues related to substandard service providers. Maria learned about the forums through Tommy Rodriguez, the security guard who had been avoiding her for weeks, but finally approached her with obvious reluctance. "Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," he said, glancing around nervously. "But they're building a case to get you fired. The review is just paperwork to make it look legitimate." Tommy's warning came with additional information that explained the coordinated nature of the campaign against her. Bradley had been promising career advancement opportunities to employees who supported his building efficiency initiative, while subtly threatening professional consequences for anyone who defended the current cleaning arrangements. The systematic nature of the harassment was even more calculated than Maria had realized. "I've seen this before," Tommy continued, his voice low and troubled. "They did something similar to the previous security company, when they wanted to switch to a cheaper contractor. Create problems, document complaints, then present the termination as a business necessity rather than a personal decision." The conversation took place in a secluded stairwell during Tommy's evening rounds, away from the surveillance cameras and listening ears that made honest communication dangerous elsewhere in the building. His willingness to warn Maria came with significant personal risk, but his conscience had finally overcome his professional caution. "The thing is," Tommy added, "I've been watching you work for years. You're the most thorough, reliable person in this building. Whatever they're saying about your performance, it's not true. But truth doesn't matter when someone with Bradley's connections wants you gone." Maria thanked Tommy for his honesty and his courage in speaking with her. His warning confirmed what she had already suspected. The harassment campaign was approaching its intended conclusion, and her termination was being orchestrated to appear justified rather than vindictive. The building efficiency review would provide the documentary evidence needed to satisfy human resources requirements and legal protections, creating a paper trail that would mask the personal nature of Bradley's vendetta. That evening, Maria sat at her kitchen table with the Veterans Affairs letter spread before her, weighing options that would determine not just her immediate future, but her fundamental identity. She could continue to endure the harassment quietly, hoping to outlast Bradley's attention span and preserve the anonymity she had maintained for 15 years. She could resign gracefully, accepting defeat but maintaining her dignity, and avoiding the public confrontation that revelation would inevitably bring. Or she could choose to attend the ceremony, to step forward and reclaim the recognition that had been deferred for operational necessity, to allow her community to learn the truth about the woman they had been systematically humiliating. The decision carried implications beyond her personal situation. It would affect everyone who had participated in the campaign against her, everyone who had made assumptions about her worth based on her occupation, everyone who had concluded that 15 years of faithful service meant nothing compared to their prejudices and professional ambitions. The choice was complicated by Maria's genuine preference for privacy and her hard-earned appreciation for quiet dignity. She had found peace in anonymity, purpose in humble work, and satisfaction in service that didn't require external validation. This ceremony would transform her from an invisible worker into a public figure, from someone who cleaned bathrooms to someone who had saved lives, from a target of harassment to a symbol of hidden heroism. But as Maria considered her options, she realized that the decision wasn't really about her preferences or comfort level. The campaign against her had revealed something troubling about the community she served, something that went beyond individual cruelty to encompass systemic disrespect for working people, casual dismissal of human dignity, and automatic assumptions about worth based on social position rather than character. Her silence had enabled that disrespect to flourish unchallenged. Her anonymity had allowed people like Bradley Morrison to treat service workers as disposable without consequence. Her acceptance of their abuse had reinforced their belief that some people mattered less than others, that professional status determined human value, that power justified contempt. The ceremony offered more than personal vindication. It offered an opportunity to challenge assumptions, to force a reckoning with prejudices, to demonstrate that heroism could be found in unexpected places, and extraordinary service could be performed by people who appeared ordinary. The woman who cleaned their bathrooms could also save their lives. The person they dismissed as worthless could be invaluable to their country. The individual they saw as powerless could possess capabilities they couldn't imagine. Maria picked up a pen and began composing her response to the Veterans Affairs invitation. The letter would commit her to a path that would transform everything about her life at Pinnacle Corporate Tower, but it would also honor the memory of her father, recognize the sacrifice of her fellow veterans, and remind her community that true strength often wore humble clothes. The point of no return wasn't the moment when Bradley Morrison first humiliated her in the hallway, or when Jessica Chen threatened her employment, or when the building efficiency review was announced. The point of no return was the moment when Maria Santos decided to stop hiding her light under the bushel of others' expectations, and step forward to claim the recognition that had been waiting for her in a wooden box for 15 years. Her response to the Veterans Affairs Office was brief but decisive. She would attend the ceremony, she would accept the public recognition, and she would allow her story to be told. The woman who had saved American lives in classified operations was ready to save her own dignity in a very public revelation that would change everything for everyone involved. The decision made, Maria sealed the envelope and placed it on her kitchen table to be mailed the next morning. In 3 weeks, the community that had dismissed her as dispensable would discover that they had been living among a genuine American hero, and the people who had tormented her would face the consequences of their cruelty in the most public way possible. The morning of October 15th arrived with the crisp desert air that marked the beginning of Phoenix's most pleasant season. Maria Santos woke at 4:30, 2 hours earlier than her usual schedule, and prepared for what she knew would be the most transformative day of her civilian life. The Veterans Affairs ceremony was scheduled for 10 o'clock at the Phoenix Veterans Memorial, but Maria had received word that a local television news crew wanted to interview her beforehand, setting in motion a series of events that would ripple through her community in ways she could hardly imagine. She dressed carefully in the outfit she had purchased specifically for the occasion, a navy blue dress that honored her military service without being ostentatious, paired with a simple pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. For the first time in 15 years, she wouldn't be wearing her cleaning uniform to work. Instead, she called Bob Williams to inform him that she would be attending a community event and would arrive at Pinnacle Corporate Tower later in the day to complete her essential duties. Bob's response was curt and dismissive. "Community events don't pay the bills, Maria. We've got important clients coming through the building today, and I need to know that the executive floors will be spotless. If you can't prioritize your work responsibilities, maybe it's time to reconsider your employment here." Maria assured him that the bathrooms would be clean to their usual standards, though she didn't explain that by the time she returned to the building, her relationship with everyone there would be fundamentally different. She hung up the phone and walked to her bedroom, where the wooden box sat open on her dresser for the first time in 15 years. The Congressional Medal of Honor rested in its place of honor, ready to be worn publicly by the woman who had earned it through extraordinary courage in hostile waters half a world away. The local news interview took place at 7:30 in the morning, conducted by veteran reporter Amanda Walsh from Channel 12 News. Amanda had been covering veterans' stories for over a decade and had specifically requested the opportunity to interview Maria after learning about her unique situation from the Veterans Affairs Public Information Office. The interview location was Maria's modest apartment, chosen to illustrate the contrast between her humble civilian life and her extraordinary military service. Maria Santos has been cleaning bathrooms at one of Phoenix's most prestigious corporate buildings for 15 years, Amanda began, speaking directly to the camera while Maria sat quietly on her worn sofa. What the executives and employees at that building don't know is that the woman who maintains their facilities is also a recipient of the Congressional Medal of Honor, our nation's highest military decoration, awarded for actions so heroic that they remained classified until recently. The interview revealed Maria's story in careful detail, from her childhood in East Los Angeles through her Navy service to her decision to live quietly in civilian life. Amanda's questions were respectful but probing, designed to help viewers understand both the magnitude of Maria's military achievements and the dignity she had maintained while accepting society's dismissal of her worth based on her occupation. "Why did you choose cleaning work after your military service?" Amanda asked, her tone conveying genuine curiosity rather than judgment. Maria's response was measured and thoughtful. "Every job has value when it's performed with integrity and purpose. I found satisfaction in maintaining spaces where other people could work effectively, even if they didn't notice my efforts. Service takes many forms, and I was honored to serve my community in a different way after serving my country." The interview included footage of Maria's medals and commendations, along with recently declassified photographs from her naval service that showed her during training exercises with SEAL teams. The visual contrast was striking: the confident, capable military officer in combat gear versus the quiet, unassuming woman in civilian clothes who had become invisible to the community around her. Amanda's investigation had uncovered additional details about Maria's situation at Pinnacle Corporate Tower, including the recent harassment campaign and the building efficiency review designed to justify her termination. The reporter had spoken with current and former employees who confirmed the systematic nature of the abuse Maria had endured, creating a narrative that would resonate powerfully with viewers who understood workplace bullying and social prejudice. Sources tell us that Maria has faced increasing pressure at work from employees who question her competence and professionalism, Amanda reported. "What these critics don't realize is that they've been harassing someone whose competence has been proven under the most extreme circumstances imaginable, someone whose professionalism has been recognized at the highest levels of government." The news segment was scheduled to air during the noon broadcast, strategically timed to reach maximum viewership and generate social media discussion throughout the afternoon. Amanda had also prepared a longer feature story for the evening news, including interviews with military historians who could explain the significance of Medal of Honor recipients and the rarity of classified heroic actions being revealed to the public. At 9:30, Maria arrived at the Phoenix Veterans Memorial, a beautifully landscaped area featuring monuments to servicemen and women from all conflicts. The ceremony had drawn a larger crowd than organizers had anticipated, with families of veterans, active-duty military personnel, and curious citizens filling the available seating and standing areas. A temporary stage had been erected for the speakers, decorated with American flags and military service emblems. Captain Sarah Mitchell, commanding officer of SEAL Team 7, was among the military personnel who had come to honor the Medal of Honor recipients. Sarah had reviewed the classified files of all attendees as part of her preparation for the ceremony, and Maria's record had particularly impressed her. The underwater rescue operation off Somalia represented exactly the kind of courage and tactical excellence that defined the SEAL ethos, performed by someone who had never sought glory or recognition. As Maria took her designated seat among the other honored veterans, she noticed several familiar faces in the crowd. Tommy Rodriguez, the security guard from Pinnacle Corporate Tower, had come in his dress uniform from his own military service. Mrs. Patterson, her elderly neighbor who had been avoiding her for weeks, sat in the third row with an expression of confusion and growing recognition. Even some employees from Henderson and Associates had come, drawn by curiosity about a local ceremony that was receiving unusual media attention. The ceremony began with remarks from the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, who explained the unique nature of the event and the long-overdue recognition being extended to service members whose heroism had been hidden for national security reasons. Each recipient was introduced individually, with a brief description of their classified service and the actions that had earned them the Medal of Honor. When Maria's name was called, the description of her service was comprehensive and powerful. The presenter, a Navy admiral who had personally reviewed her mission files, described the night when she had disobeyed direct orders to save 17 American hostages. Swimming through dangerous waters, and single-handedly neutralizing armed guards before coordinating a complex rescue operation. Petty Officer Santos demonstrated extraordinary courage under fire, tactical brilliance under pressure, and unwavering commitment to saving American lives, the Admiral announced to the crowd. Her actions went far beyond the call of duty, embodying the highest traditions of naval service and setting a standard for heroism that few will ever match. As Maria stood to acknowledge the applause, she noticed movement in the crowd that suggested word was spreading beyond the ceremony itself. People were using their phones to record video and share information on social media, creating a real-time broadcast of her recognition that would reach far beyond the physical attendees. Captain Sarah Mitchell approached the podium to offer remarks specifically about Maria's service alongside SEAL units, lending additional credibility and context to her heroic actions. Sarah's words carried special weight because of her own reputation and the respect accorded to SEAL officers by military and civilian audiences alike. What many people don't understand about Medal of Honor recipients, Captain Mitchell explained, is that their heroism isn't a single moment of courage, but the culmination of years of training, preparation, and dedication. Maria Santos didn't become a hero on that night off Somalia. She revealed the heroism she had been developing throughout her naval career. The ceremony included the presentation of a special recognition certificate acknowledging the delayed public acknowledgement of Maria's service, along with a flag that had been flown over the Capitol in her honor. As she received these items, Maria felt the weight of 15 years of hidden identity finally being lifted from her shoulders. But the most powerful moment came when Captain Mitchell asked all active duty SEALs present to join her in a gesture of respect that was unprecedented in Maria's experience. 8 Navy SEALs in dress uniform approached the stage and, in unison, dropped to one knee in a military salute that honored not just Maria's rank and service, but her extraordinary courage and sacrifice. The image was captured by dozens of cameras and phones, creating a visual that would become iconic within hours. The sight of America's most elite warriors kneeling in respect before a woman who cleaned bathrooms for a living challenged every assumption about worth, value, and recognition in ways that would reverberate through social media and news coverage for weeks to come. Maria's response to the honor was characteristically humble. "I accepted this medal on behalf of all the people who couldn't come home that night," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the memorial grounds. "Every day since then has been a gift, an opportunity to serve my community in whatever way I could. The uniform changes, but the mission of service continues." As the ceremony concluded and attendees began to disperse, Maria found herself surrounded by people who wanted to thank her, congratulate her, and ask questions about her story. The transformation was immediate and dramatic. The woman who had been invisible for 15 years was suddenly the center of attention. The person who had been dismissed as insignificant was now recognized as extraordinary. Tommy Rodriguez approached her with obvious emotion, struggling to find words adequate to the moment. "All these years," he said, his voice thick with feeling, "all these years I've been working next to a real hero, and I never knew. I should have stood up for you when they started treating you badly. I should have known better." Mrs. Patterson, the elderly neighbor who had been avoiding Maria for weeks, pushed through the crowd with tears in her eyes. "I saw you on the news this morning," she said, grasping Maria's hands in her own. "I've been such a fool, listening to gossip instead of trusting what I knew about your character. Can you ever forgive me?" The personal apologies continued, as more people from Maria's civilian life recognized the magnitude of their misjudgment. The mechanic who serviced her car, the grocery store clerk who had become distant, the apartment maintenance worker who had treated her with suspicion, all approached with expressions of shame and requests for forgiveness. But the most significant reactions were yet to come. As news of the ceremony began to reach Pinnacle Corporate Tower through social media posts and text messages from employees who had attended. By noon, the building was buzzing with rumors and speculation about the woman who had been cleaning their bathrooms while they plotted her termination. The building efficiency review that was supposed to culminate in Maria's dismissal had suddenly become irrelevant in the face of a revelation that cast everyone's behavior in a harsh new light. Bradley Morrison was in his office when his assistant rushed in with her phone, showing him a video from the ceremony that was already going viral on local social media groups. The footage showed Maria receiving her recognition while the narrator explained that she was currently employed as a cleaning woman at a downtown corporate building where she had faced recent harassment from executives who questioned her professionalism and competence. The irony was devastating and immediate. The man who had been systematically humiliating a Medal of Honor recipient, the executive who had questioned the professionalism of someone whose courage had been recognized at the highest levels of government, the person who had dismissed 15 years of faithful service as worthless, was now facing public exposure of his own character and judgment. Jessica Chen received multiple calls from other employees asking if she had seen the news coverage, if she knew about Maria's background, if the company had any official response to the revelation that they had been harassing a war hero. The performance improvement plan and building efficiency review that had been designed to justify Maria's termination were suddenly radioactive documents that could expose the company to public relations disaster and potential legal liability. Bob Williams found himself fielding questions from building tenants who had seen the news coverage and were asking pointed questions about how Henderson and Associates treated their service workers. The story of Maria's hidden heroism was spreading rapidly through professional networks, creating scrutiny of the building's management practices and the corporate culture that had enabled systematic harassment of an extraordinary individual. The revelation had transformed everything in a matter of hours. The woman who had been targeted for elimination was now a local celebrity whose story embodied themes of hidden heroism, workplace dignity, and the danger of judging people based on their occupations rather than their character. The people who had tormented her were now facing public exposure of their own conduct, and the institution that had enabled their behavior was confronting the consequences of tolerating systematic harassment. Maria Santos had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, carrying with her a story that would challenge assumptions, demand accountability, and remind everyone involved that true worth had nothing to do with job titles or social status. The battle was far from over, but the terms of engagement had changed completely, and the advantage now belonged to the woman who had always possessed it, but had chosen to keep it hidden until the moment when revelation became not just possible, but necessary. By 2:00 that afternoon, the video of Navy SEALs kneeling before Maria Santos had been shared over 50,000 times across various social media platforms. The hashtag Hidden Hero was trending locally, and news outlets from across Arizona were scrambling to cover the story of the Medal of Honor recipient who had been cleaning bathrooms while facing workplace harassment. The Phoenix Business Journal had already reached out to Henderson and Associates for comment, and 3 employment law firms had contacted Maria's apartment building manager trying to reach her. Maria arrived at Pinnacle Corporate Tower at 3:15, parking her Honda Civic in the same employee space she had used for 15 years. But everything about the building felt different now. The security desk, usually staffed by Tommy Rodriguez with minimal acknowledgement of her presence, was buzzing with activity as he fielded phone calls from reporters requesting interviews and building tenants, asking questions about the woman they had just learned was a war hero. Tommy's face broke into a wide smile when he saw Maria approaching with her cleaning cart. "Maria, I can't believe. I always knew you were special, but this..." He gestured helplessly at the phones ringing around him. "Channel 15 wants to do a live interview with you in the lobby. The Arizona Republic is sending a photographer. And Mr. Williams has been looking for you everywhere." The elevator ride to the executive floors was surreal. Maria pressed the button for the 30th floor, the same floor where Bradley Morrison had first humiliated her, but now she carried herself with a different energy. Not arrogance or vindictiveness, but the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to hide her true identity from the world. The hallway that had been the scene of her initial confrontation with Bradley was now filled with employees who had never spoken to her before. They clustered in small groups, whispering among themselves and stealing glances at her as she moved through the space with her cleaning supplies. The dynamic had shifted completely. Instead of being invisible, she was the center of attention, and instead of dismissing her, people were watching her with newfound respect and curiosity. Margaret Henderson, the senior partner whose nephew had orchestrated the harassment campaign, emerged from her corner office as Maria passed. Margaret was a woman in her early 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, who had built her reputation on reading people accurately and positioning herself advantageously in any situation. "Miss Santos," Margaret said, her voice carrying a formality that hadn't been present in their few previous interactions. "I wonder if I might have a word with you when you have a moment. Perhaps in my office?" Maria nodded politely. "Of course, Ms. Henderson. I'll finish my scheduled work first, if that's acceptable." The response was perfectly professional but carried an undertone that hadn't existed in Maria's interactions with building executives before. She was no longer asking permission or seeking approval. She was stating her intentions with the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to set her own priorities. As Maria began her cleaning routine, she noticed that the executive bathroom had been left in pristine condition. No coffee grounds scattered on counters, no paper towels thrown carelessly on floors, no deliberately created messes designed to frustrate and humiliate her. Someone had clearly communicated that the games were over, that the systematic harassment had become a liability rather than an acceptable form of entertainment. Jessica Chen appeared in the bathroom doorway as Maria was restocking paper towels, her usual confidence replaced by visible nervousness. The human resources manager who had threatened Maria's employment just days earlier now seemed uncertain about how to interact with someone whose heroic service had become public knowledge. "Maria, I've been trying to reach you," Jessica said, her voice lacking its previous authority. "We need to discuss some adjustments to your performance improvement plan. In light of recent developments, the company feels it would be appropriate to reconsider some of our previous assessments." Maria continued her work methodically, giving Jessica her full attention but not pausing in her duties. "What specific adjustments did you have in mind, Ms. Chen?" "Well, obviously, the performance improvement plan itself seems unnecessary at this point. Your work has always been adequate, and the recent feedback we received may have been influenced by factors that don't reflect your actual performance." The careful language was designed to minimize legal liability while attempting to repair a relationship that had been damaged by systematic harassment. Jessica was clearly operating from talking points developed hastily by legal counsel who understood that the company was facing potential public relations disaster and employment law violations. "I appreciate your reconsideration," Maria replied diplomatically. "I've always taken pride in my work, regardless of how others chose to evaluate it." The conversation was interrupted by commotion in the hallway, voices raised in what sounded like an argument. Maria and Jessica both moved toward the door to investigate, finding a crowd gathered around Bradley Morrison's office. Through the open doorway, they could see Bradley at his desk, phone pressed to his ear, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "I don't care what the video shows," Bradley was saying loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "My treatment of that woman was perfectly professional. I held her to the same standards I hold everyone else. If she happens to have some military background, that doesn't change the fact that her work performance was questionable." The defense was not only unconvincing but actively damaging, as several employees began pulling out their phones to record Bradley's continued dismissal of Maria's service and character. His inability to acknowledge the magnitude of his misjudgment, much less express remorse for his behavior, was creating additional evidence of his poor judgment and character. Margaret Henderson pushed through the crowd and entered Bradley's office, closing the door behind her with a force that suggested the conversation inside would be intense and potentially career-altering. The employees in the hallway began to disperse, but not before several had captured video of Bradley's defensive statements that would likely find their way to social media within minutes. Maria finished her cleaning duties and made her way to Margaret Henderson's office, where the senior partner was waiting with documents spread across her conference table. Margaret's expression was serious but respectful, a marked contrast to the casual dismissal that had characterized the company's previous treatment of Maria. "Please, sit down," Margaret said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I want to begin by expressing my personal regret for the treatment you've received from some members of our staff. What I learned today about your military service and the recognition you've received makes it clear that we failed to appreciate the exceptional individual working in our building." Maria took the offered seat, maintaining the same calm demeanor she had shown throughout the harassment campaign. "I never expected special treatment because of my military service, Ms. Henderson. I only wanted to do my job with dignity and respect." "And that's exactly what you should have received," Margaret replied firmly. "What happened instead was unacceptable, and I want you to know that we're taking immediate steps to address it. My nephew's behavior was inappropriate regardless of your background, but learning about your service makes his actions particularly shameful." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with Margaret outlining a comprehensive response to the situation that included disciplinary action for Bradley, sensitivity training for all staff, and a formal apology from the company. More significantly, she offered Maria a promotion to head of facilities management, with a substantial salary increase and responsibility for overseeing all building services. "Your 15 years of faithful service, combined with your obvious leadership capabilities and attention to detail, make you the ideal person to ensure that all workers in this building are treated with the respect they deserve," Margaret explained. "This isn't charity or an attempt to buy your silence. It's a recognition that we've been wasting your talents and expertise for far too long." Maria listened carefully to the proposal, asking thoughtful questions about responsibilities and expectations. The offer was generous and represented a complete reversal of the company's previous position, but she wanted to ensure that any acceptance would be based on genuine respect rather than damage control. "I'm honored by your offer," Maria said finally, "but I need to know that this represents a real change in how Henderson and Associates values all its workers, not just those whose backgrounds become public knowledge. There are other people in this building who deserve the same respect and dignity I'm now receiving." Margaret nodded emphatically. "Absolutely. This situation has forced us to examine our entire corporate culture, and we're committed to creating an environment where every employee, regardless of their position, is treated as a valued member of our team." As their meeting concluded, Maria asked for time to consider the promotion offer. The day had brought so many changes so quickly that she wanted to process everything carefully before making decisions about her future. Margaret agreed readily, emphasizing that there was no pressure and that Maria would be welcome to continue in her current role with full support and respect, regardless of her decision about advancement. The news coverage continued to intensify throughout the evening. Channel 12's extended feature story included interviews with military historians who explained the significance of classified Medal of Honor actions, employment law experts who discussed workplace harassment, and community leaders who praised Maria's quiet service and dignity. The story had evolved beyond local interest to become a national example of hidden heroism and workplace justice. Social media reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of Maria and critical of the harassment she had endured. The hashtag #HiddenHero generated thousands of posts sharing stories of underestimated individuals, workplace mistreatment, and the importance of treating all workers with dignity. Several veterans organizations issued statements praising Maria's service and condemning the treatment she had received from people who had never served their country. Bradley Morrison's continued defensive statements, captured on multiple phones throughout the day, became viral content that damaged not only his personal reputation but also raised questions about Henderson and Associates' hiring and promotion practices. By evening, his social media accounts had been deactivated, and rumors circulated that his employment with the company was under serious review. 3 days later, Maria made her decision about Margaret Henderson's promotion offer. She accepted the position of Facilities Management Director, but with conditions that reflected her commitment to systematic change rather than personal advancement. Her first initiative would be implementing comprehensive respect and dignity training for all employees. Her second would be establishing clear protocols for addressing workplace harassment, and her third would be creating advancement opportunities for all building service workers. The announcement of Maria's promotion was covered by local media as a positive conclusion to a story that had captured public attention. But for Maria, the promotion was less important than the broader changes it represented. She had stepped forward not for personal recognition but to challenge assumptions and demand accountability, and the response had exceeded her expectations. Her first day in her new office, located on the 28th floor with windows overlooking the Phoenix skyline, began with a visit from Tommy Rodriguez, who knocked tentatively on her doorframe. "I wanted to thank you," Tommy said, his voice filled with emotion. Not just for your service, but for showing all of us what real dignity looks like. The way you handled everything, never getting angry, never trying to get revenge, just standing up for what was right. That's true leadership. Maria's response reflected the wisdom she had gained through years of service, both military and civilian. We all have opportunities to choose how we treat others, Tommy. The uniform doesn't make the person. The choices do. I hope what happened here helps everyone remember that. The transformation at Pinnacle Corporate Tower extended far beyond Maria's individual situation. The publicity surrounding her story had prompted other companies to examine their own treatment of service workers, leading to industry-wide discussions about respect, dignity, and recognition in the workplace. Several businesses implemented new policies specifically designed to prevent the kind of systematic harassment that Maria had endured. Bradley Morrison's employment with Henderson and Associates was terminated 1 week after the ceremony, following an internal investigation that documented multiple violations of company policy and professional standards. His departure was announced without fanfare, but the message was clear. Behavior that had been tolerated or even encouraged in the past would no longer be acceptable. 6 months later, Maria was invited to speak at a national conference on workplace dignity, sharing her story with human resources professionals and corporate executives from across the country. Her message was simple but powerful. Every worker deserves respect regardless of their position. Hidden heroism exists in unexpected places, and true leadership means creating environments where all people can contribute their talents without fear of harassment or discrimination. The wooden box that had sat in Maria's bedroom for 15 years now rested on a shelf in her new office, its contents no longer hidden but displayed with quiet pride. The Congressional Medal of Honor served as a reminder not just of her military service but of the courage required to stand up for dignity and justice in civilian life. Maria Santos had learned that stepping out of the shadows didn't diminish the value of quiet service but enhanced it, that recognition could be a tool for positive change rather than personal aggrandizement, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not on foreign battlefields, but in the everyday spaces where people worked and lived together. Her story became a touchstone for discussions about hidden potential, workplace respect, and the danger of judging others based on limited information. But for Maria herself, the most important outcome was the knowledge that she had honored her father's memory, served her community with integrity, and used her moment of recognition to create positive change for others who might otherwise remain invisible. The woman who had cleaned bathrooms for 15 years had become a symbol of hidden heroism, quiet dignity, and the transformative power of standing up for what was right. Her legacy would extend far beyond her military service to encompass the civilian courage she had shown in demanding that all workers be treated with the respect and dignity they deserved. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.